Recently, conservatives, for some reason, have been gripped by a sense of hatred over fact checkers. Which is weird. You would think people would be fine with showing pieces of information to be bunk, unless you believed in that disinformation. Then in that case, fuck those fact checkers. Fuck those guys. You know what we should do? We should sue them. That's exactly what Candace Owens did about a year ago, when she sued Lead Stories in US Today for fact checking, arguing that their fact checking amounted to defamation. It's been a year since the lawsuit happened. Where did it go? Well, it got recently dismissed. Now, my video isn't exactly about the lawsuit itself, but the coverage of the lawsuit by a Canadian lawyer slash YouTuber named Viva Frei. Now, Viva here thinks that judge's dismissal is bullshit. One of the issues being is that current facts are disputed between experts. Owen's statements weren't proven to be false. Owen had one side of experts, and Lead Stories had another, and they just disagreed on what was true.
Claim of false, because medical authorities in the United States were saying that Candace Owens' statement as to how they're counting deaths, that they're inflating the death number, was false. And so the court said, no, there are authorities who say this is false, therefore Lead Stories' qualification is sufficiently true or not defamatorily false, which highlights a fundamental problem in my mind of fact-checking in general. Lead Stories comes in and fact checks and says Candace Owens' statement is false because her authorities say one thing and another authority says another thing, therefore it can be qualified as false. That can qualify it as disputed, but not false. And this just really goes to show the fact that these fact checkers are not, fact checking facts. They are qualifying as false issues where there is a legitimate or potentially legitimate dispute.
Here's the thing with that claim. It's false. One of the major issues brought up in the case is whether these two statements are false, based on Owen's assertion that her first Facebook post was factually accurate. Except the judge goes on to claim that each of Owen's own references to other medical authorities are inaccurate. Not a dispute between experts, not because Lead Stories experts say one thing, but because Owen's own experts don't say what Owen claims they are saying. That's what most of this defamation case is about. Basically, the judge is just calling bullshit on her own statements. The first expert Owen brings up is Dr. Lee, to make the claim that COVID deaths in the United States are being overstated. While Owens does acknowledge that Dr. Lee's article is only in reference to UK's method for counting, she counters this by writing, "The reported criteria for cause of death are international. Thus, the standards to be followed in the UK mirror those in the US." However, the judge himself disagrees with Owen's assertion, laying out that Dr. Lee himself doesn't come to that conclusion, nor makes any assertion otherwise, as according to Dr. Lee, the data on COVID-19 deaths differ widely from country to country. Dr. Lee was arguing that the data between countries wasn't comparable. He points out countries have widely different death rates and writes on the issue of variance between them. This is a beautiful example of cherry picking. Dr. Lee makes the claim that UK death rate is possibly high, and the standards differ for each country. But Owen just makes the assertion the counting method is international without any additional references and in contradiction with Dr. Lee's claims, only for Owens to come to the conclusion that the counting methods in the UK and America are the same. Jumping to the next doctors Owen uses, we have Dr. Brooks and Dr. Exik. Firstly, Viva makes it very clear that he has no idea what medical authorities Owen uses or what authorities Lead Story uses.
The authorities in the United States were counting COVID deaths, and she made a statement that the death count is being inflated for the purposes of exaggerating, promoting the pandemic, etc., etc. That is when Lead Stories comes in and says, no, this is false. Fact check false, because Dr. Birx says that the numbers are being counted properly. Other medical authorities are saying the numbers are being counted properly. And ultimately, the court concluded that there was, even within the four corners of the lawsuit and the exhibits filed therein, there was sufficient evidence to justify Lead Stories' claim of false, because medical authorities in the United States were saying that Candace Owens' statement as to how they're counting deaths, that they're inflating the death number, was false.
The only doctor Lead Stories brings up in their article is Dr. Sally Aiken. Lead Stories does not bring up Dr. Birx ever in their article. The only mention of Dr. Birx is by Owens herself, in an attempt to prove that her post was factually accurate. I'm uncertain to how he came to the conclusion that the usage of Dr. Birx was by Lead Stories instead of Owens. It's not like he just only read an article. At the end of his video, he shows and reads a part of the judge's opinion, showing he has read the case. Similarly to Dr. Lee, the judge disagrees with the usage of Dr. Birx and Dr. Exik by Owens again. The doctors generally make two statements. One, countries have different recording methods, and two, when a person has a pre-existing condition and COVID-19 dies, medical authorities in the United States count it as a COVID-19 death. The judge disagrees with the usage of the doctors in reference to her first Facebook post. As Owen writes, I spent all day today trying to look up the daily death rates for any other disease. You can't get it anywhere. They are reporting only on coronavirus deaths. However, Berkson and Zeke don't make any mention that the US is only counting COVID deaths. Nor are they saying when an individual with pre-existing conditions who are positive for COVID dies, that only COVID would be listed as the single cause of death. Another issue with bringing up these doctors is that lead stories are consistent with the doctors. Lead story only adds that the pre-existing conditions will also be listed as a contributory cause on the death certificate. So the dispute between medical authorities isn't real, as the only issue concerning experts is that Owens' own experts don't support her. Coming back to Viva's statement on disputed facts.
Lead Stories comes in and fact checks and says Candace Owens' statement is false because her authorities say one thing and another authority says another thing, therefore it can be qualified as false. That can qualify it as disputed, but not false. And this just really goes to show the fact that these fact checkers are not, fact checking facts. They are qualifying as false issues where there is a legitimate or potentially legitimate dispute.
It's strange, as Viva's line of reasoning is a near one-to-one, equal to the line of reasoning that Owen uses in her original complaint. To the extent that the first Facebook post relied on its own expert, Dr. Lee, and Lead Stories article relied on its own expert, Dr. Aiken, Lead Stories had actual knowledge. They could not fact-check the first Facebook post and prove it false, because the competing experts' opinions on how COVID-19 deaths are being counted reflected an inconclusive disagreement among experts. The judge does respond to the statement by firstly saying that opinions themselves may carry facts, but also reiterating the point that Dr. Lee doesn't support Owen's first Facebook post. And now another issue that Viva takes up is Lead Stories making the statement, hoax alert.
The fourth claim. But coming back to the hoax alert, because Lead Stories not only fact-checked Candace Owens' statement and said it was false, they qualified it as a hoax alert. And the court, as relates to adjudicating that hoax alert is not defamatory, basically said that it's hyperbolic rhetoric. It's more akin to a statement of opinion, hyperbolic descriptions, and not a factual statement susceptible of being defamatory. And that is how they got around the qualification of hoax alert, which, in my mind, calling something and someone a hoax, in some circumstances, leads to defamation lawsuits that go all the way to the Supreme Court, and in other cases, they get dismissed on a motion to dismiss, a Rule 12b-6 motion to dismiss. I don't say politics ruins everything for nothing, but it certainly seems that politics ruins everything, or at the very least creates a two-tiered legal system, judicial system, prosecutorial system, everything system.
Now, Viva Frei doesn't counter the judge's reasoning at all, seemingly concluding that this judge did not make this decision in good faith, but was being political. Viva doesn't make an argument against the judge by using other cases related to the issue, probably because the judge isn't pulling his reasoning out of his ass. He cites a Supreme Court case about the usage of how the term blackmail isn't itself defamatory, another case that fits this case to the T about the statement elaborate and dangerous hoax, also not being considered defamatory, and in a footnote goes through a whole plethora of terms that in themselves are not considered to be defamatory. The only additional comment Viva makes is near the end of the video where he does read a part of the judge's explanation, but he then cuts to Alex Jones yelling like a maniac.
All right, I just have to finish this by reading one section on the hoax alert. Moreover, in Montgomery versus Risen, the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit found that the book author defendant's description of the plaintiff's software as an, quote, elaborate and dangerous hoax, end quote, in his book was merely, quote, loose, figurative, or hyperbolic, end quote, and that such language could not serve as the basis for liability in a defamation action. Similarly, the term, quote, hoax alert in the Lead Stories article was used as loose, figurative, or hyperbolic language. It is not reasonably conceivable that readers who read the Lead Stories article would have understood, quote, hoax alert to mean that the plaintiffs were intentionally spreading a lie. Instead, the readers would have understood, quote, hoax alert as a rhetorical hyperbole implying that the Owens post carries inaccurate information and that the readers should proceed cautiously when reading the post.
Moving past statements made by Viva, let's look at one more thing that I thought was interesting from Owens' lawsuit. The first statement that Owens had accused as being defamatory. The false claims about the COVID-19 death counting method originated in a post published on Facebook by Candace Owens on March 29, 2020. Lead Stories rightly points out that that's not what they wrote. They only wrote, the claims originated in a post archived here, published on Facebook by Candace Owens on March 29th, 2020. The judge concludes that their original statement is not defamatory. You gotta really love it on Owens' part, where their first defamatory claim is to a statement that Lead Stories never made, and the only possible claim of defamation comes from the bits that Owens' team added. What I'm unsure about is whether Viva's video was made in good faith and he's just fucking dumb, or if he's right and politics do ruin everything. Hey guys, end of the video. Just like to say all my sources can and will be found down below, and it would be great if you could like, comment, and subscribe.